Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider podcast. Today is Wednesday, November 20th, and we got our first basketball-only episode of the season. And with that, we've got to introduce our new guy, Toyloy TJ Brown, who is going to cover LSU men's basketball for us. I know we teased this a couple weeks ago, but we finally got TJ on the pod, so welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to talk some hoops.
We're going to talk some hoops. We're going to get to know TJ, and then we've also got Darcey, who's our women's basketball beat writer.
Welcome aboard, TJ. We're very excited to have you here. If you got some food recommendations for him, drop them in the comments. We've been trying to show him around a little bit. Gave him some boudin balls for the first time. I think he enjoyed that. So yeah, he's also going to be covering Southern for us. Southern football, Southern athletics. And so he's in for a treat with that.
So let's start there. TJ is from New York, from the Bronx. Yep. Tell us, just give us the brief Cliff Notes of your career, your background.
Yeah, the brief Cliff Notes. Grew up in Bronx, New York. Same apartment my entire life. Bus, train everywhere. Went to Catholic school. Played basketball all my life. Didn't make the team. Real good high school basketball team. For those that are real hoop heads, Ian Jackson for UNC. Went to my old high school, Cardinal Hayes. So that can tell you a little bit about the quality of talent. Transitioned to trying to be an NBA player to being a sports writer, and just stuck to it, and here I am now.
That sounds familiar, man. That's like 75% of the sports writers out there. Like, yeah, I realized I couldn't hack it. So
yeah, once I didn't become a 6'3" guard, I'm like, okay, let me transition to just being this reporter.
I had a pretty similar story once I realized I wasn't going to get taller than 5'10", and I also wasn't very good at basketball. So
I can only throw a baseball 60. Okay, well, I guess that's that then. TJ covered sports in Knoxville, Tennessee, prep sports mostly, but some University of Tennessee sports, and then came down here. He's been with us a couple of weeks, doing a great job. Read his stuff on LSU men's basketball. Real quick, best and worst thing you've eaten since you moved to Baton Rouge?
Oh man, putting me on the spot. It's hard to say the worst thing. I've truly enjoyed everything.
Good. Okay, that's good.
The one that's coming to mind right now, I did enjoy my shrimp, my barbecue, my New Orleans style barbecue shrimp po' boy. Very simple. I went to Chimes with Reed, the Chimes, and other reporter, Koki, who covers our baseball team and football. Really good. It's really simple, but just like, I just can't put this down. I just have to keep eating. So that's probably been my favorite. I can't say a worse thing right now. Everything I've had has been good, truly.
They don't get much wrong at Chimes. Yeah, sponsorship line is open.
Yeah, not a bad place to go. You can never really go wrong with the Chimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of sponsors, the LSU Sports Insider podcast is brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. So let's get right into basketball, guys. And we split this up. We're going to have our LSU Vandy football podcast tomorrow. But, it's basketball time, and the men's and women's teams at LSU are undefeated. They're combined 9-0. We're going to start with the men, TJ. They're 4-0. They have the big win over K-State. They also have had a couple of these bye games, these blood donor games, I like to call them, where they've struggled a little bit and had games on their hands into the second half against both Alabama State and Charleston Southern. So it's early. It's hard to tell exactly, but do you think the real LSU is more the team that went to Manhattan, Kansas, and won a game against a Big 12 contender, or more the team that maybe we're going to see a lot of ups and downs, and they may have some of those?
Yeah, as you said, the key phrase is early. But if I have to make a bet, I do think that the Kansas State game is really encouraging, and that's mainly because of one player, which we'll discuss more about, which is Vyctorius Miller, who I don't think anyone would assume that he would be, let alone a top 3, top 4 player. But yesterday against Charleston Southern, he was legit their best player as a freshman, scoring 19 off the bench. But I think since it's early, since they've had a couple of lulls against teams that they should be winning easily by 20, 25 points or more, they have a lot to prove. They truly have a lot to prove because they get off to these strange starts where it looks like they just struggle to get either rebounds or they struggle to just run fluid offense, and then that emboldens their weaker opponent to just get out and run and score and play a lot more free in the PMAC, which should be an easier place for LSU to play in, not for the opposing team that's a mid-major. Yeah,
absolutely. So, speaking of Vyctorius Miller, it gets hard unless you're one of the top 10, top 20 freshmen in the country to come in and make an immediate impact. And Miller has done that. I mean, he's been kind of a revelation. Like, I think he changes the baseline of what this LSU team can be.
Yeah, it's Kansas. I asked him after last night's game, just sort of, where's this confidence coming from? Because I was there for the first 2 games, and he had 3 points on 1 of 7 shooting. Not that he was looking not confident, just that once he missed his first shot, he disappeared. But now, since the K-State game and obviously last night against Charleston Southern, truly just the confidence is oozing. He gets the ball. He's looking to make a move. He's not looking fearful and hesitant to pass immediately. He's willing to make a play, and he has a fluid jump shot, and he's 6'5", with a good enough ball handling skills to make his own shot. So, no, that's – you always see talent from four-star players. Like, we have a couple four-stars that one is in the starting lineup, and Robert Miller III. He hasn't really shown as much talent or shown as much of his talent as Vyctorius has. But you just never know if they'll adjust as quickly to the college game, the physicality, the speed, and just sort of just a new role compared to their high school stuff. But Vyctorius just truly, he says he puts in the work in practice. He said he has the confidence of his teammates, and now so far we're seeing it.
And I think we can talk a little bit about the Kansas State game, because one thing that surprised me was how LSU really controlled that game, throughout most of it. And that really kind of surprised me, not because I didn't think that LSU could win. I just thought that because there had so many new faces and so many young guys, I thought it would take some time to sort of get everything coming together. So maybe that's some of the things you've seen against Alabama State and Charleston Southern. Last night they fall down early. I think they trail at halftime. It has something to do with Cam Carter and Jalen Reed getting in foul trouble, right? But like, were you surprised at all about how they've looked in those sort of, the non-conference games at home versus the Kansas State game when everything looks so cohesive and so, I guess, so tight? What do you think works so well for Kansas State, and how do you think they can help translate that to the other games?
Yeah, no, for just to touch very briefly, Jalen Reed getting 2 fouls and Cam Carter getting 2 fouls in less than 5 minutes, it felt like was a big reason why the offense struggled and why Vyctorius had the chance to be inserted early and just show out. As far as the Kansas State game, I think it starts on defense. I think Kansas State may have their own issues offensively, or may not have as much connectivity as they may have had last year or 2 years ago. But still, the sort of the connection that the players on LSU had, as far as making sure to get over screens, Jai Bailey, he's the glue to everything as far as the perimeter defense goes and covering up for people. They were moving as well as rebounding. LSU's not a girthy front court. They have a few 6'10" players that are under 230. Like the heaviest player is Reed at 240, which is good. But if that's your largest player, you're probably going to get out-rebounded, as they did against Charleston Southern for the majority of that game. But I think against Kansas State, it was mainly defense, and then Cam Carter was just electric. Right. Obviously, back in his old stopping grounds, making three-pointers. It actually took him a little while to get going. The first 6 or 7 minutes, he didn't really shoot that much. Then once that first mid-ranger went in, it was curtains for him. And Vyctorius Miller, again, just a little bit of surprise in that first 15-point performance.
Yeah, Cam Carter, the Donaldsonville grad who went to K-State, transferred back to LSU, obviously highly motivated for that one. I think the men's team so far is shown some promise. Obviously, I don't think they're a perfect team. You talked about some of the flaws in the front court. Maybe in rebounding, we may see some of that. We'll talk about going forward. I do think maybe their ceiling is higher than people thought before the year. So let's flip things over to the women's side for a minute. They are 5-0. They play Tulane tonight at the PMAC. That'll be their 6th game, and they haven't played anybody who we thought coming in could challenge them, and really nobody has outside Reed of one quarter where they lost that quarter by 20 points. Everything else has been a complete domination.
Yeah, that was a really bizarre quarter. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. Murray State outscored LSU 32-12 in that quarter. Which
second quarter of the game,
yeah. Second quarter, which is really bizarre. And LSU went to the halftime down 9, and then, of course, they shifted into high gear and then won the second half by 20-something. So I think that second quarter, I wouldn't put too much stock into it. I think Murray State played good defense. They did a good job preventing LSU from getting paint touches. And then they got hot from 3, right? And in the first half, Murray State made 6 of their 14 threes. In the second half, they made 0 of their 14 threes. So that had a lot to do with it, 3-point shooting variance. But I think other than that, like you mentioned, Zach, it's tough to glean something from these games that they're winning by 50, 60 points. So we'll have to see. They're going to the Bahamas next week. They'll play a couple power conference teams there. I think we'll learn a little bit more. But right now, it looks about as good as we expected it to look. You expect them to win these games by 50 and 60 points. You expect them to really use them to try to get comfortable and just get their feet wet. If you think back to last season, they played Colorado and they lost. They lost big in that game, and they never really got a chance to get their feet wet. They got tested right away and they lost right away. I think these games are giving them a chance to sort of ease into the season and use it as a runway. To try to focus on the things they want to get better at. before they play some really stiffer competition.
LSU's ranked 7th in the country right now, and we were talking before we started recording about Flau'jae Johnson, who's off to a remarkable start. I think she had the one game against Charleston Southern, which is like a 70-point win where she only scored 18 points. Other than that, she's been over 20 points every night. She's tied for 7th in the country, 23.8 points per game. We talked about this preseason in our basketball preview episode. Like, she showed every sign of being ready for the spotlight, and it looks like she may be embracing it to the point where maybe she elevates her game even more.
Something clicked for her last year once postseason play began. If you remember LSU's first SEC tournament game against Ole Miss, she was LSU's best player, and she sort of carried that throughout the postseason into the NCAA tournament. She was the best player in the Sweet 16 win over UCLA. That's really when she made her mark, right? And the big question was, okay, so she showed that in the tournament. Can she carry that over into a new season and really hit the ground running? And I think the answer to that question is absolutely yes. So far she has got 3 25-point games. She's one of 6 players across the country to have 3 25-point games so far. And she's not only scoring it at a high level, she's also been super efficient. I mean, she's shooting north of 60% from the field. That's good for anybody, much less a guard. And I think she's also shooting above 50% from 3. She just looks so comfortable and confident. And I think she's surpassed any kind of expectations you could have possibly had for her. We'll see. She'll probably cool off a little bit. The scoring might take a little dip. But she's been about as good as any LSU fans could have hoped, and as any sort of expectations could have been put upon her.
Yeah, the efficiency piece, I was right about to say that it's looking easy.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you want for your star after Angel Reese leaves and departs to go to the W. Flau'jae's athleticism, her fluidity, her confidence, similar to Vyctorius, obviously at a much higher level.
Yeah.
But her confidence oozes off her whenever she's going down the court. She doesn't think anyone can guard her. And that's obviously great for LSU.
It's one of those things when you play these overmatched opponents, you want to see, especially if you're a national championship contender, you have those hopes like LSU's women's team does. You want to take care of. I mean, you don't want to be messing around with those teams. And outside of the one quarter against Murray State, where okay, they get hot from 3, maybe LSU kind of gets caught. What's going on here? And you get caught in a long stretch before a timeout, and all of a sudden you're not playing well. Any other red flags besides that one quarter that you see? Again, it's so early. We're talking about totally overmatched opponents. But is there anything that if LSU gets tripped up by something against stiffer competition, you can pinpoint and say that'll be it?
I think if you want to nitpick, you can probably say they could do maybe a little bit better job of getting to the free throw line and making their free throws. The free throw percentage, the rate at which they make those shots, it hasn't been great. I think they can get a little bit better in that. I think they can do a little bit better on the defensive glass. They are allowing a few too many offensive rebounds. But other than that, they've pretty much checked every box. They look exactly like they're supposed to look in year 4 under Kim Mulkey with all the talent that they have and the way she wants them to play. So I think they've answered every sort of question that we had for them. We kind of know who's going to play point guard. It's going to be Cheyenne Day-Wilson. I think she's a good fit for Mulkey's system. I think she can hit some threes. She can really facilitate. She does a good job of running the offense in transition. I think we've seen flashes of her really sort of creating opportunities for Flau'jae Johnson, Michaela Williams, and Nisa Morrow in transition, and that's really what Kim Mulkey wants and needs from her point guard. I think we could see a little bit more from Samaya Smith. Obviously, she had the knee injury last year, and it hasn't even been a year since she suffered that knee injury. She tore her ACL, MCL, and meniscus in her right knee, and so she had to recover. She recovered in time to play in the preseason, play in practice, and then play a full share of minutes once the game started. But she hasn't looked fully like herself like she did last year before she got hurt, and that'll come with time. She needs some time to ramp up and get her legs back under her. But yeah, other than that, I think they've been fine. I think we'll find out more about the team once they go to the Bahamas. But through the first 5 games, it's been about as good as you could have hoped for.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at things, these teams are like 1/7, 1/8 of the way through the season. It's like a football team being at halftime of week 2.
Right.
I mean, we're super early here, and for the most part, they played a team in week 1 that you're not going to take a lot away from outside of the men's game against K-State. You watched the LSU Sports Insider. This is our first basketball only episode. Well, we had a preview, but our first basketball only episode of the season, let's say. And we encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We're going to have much more to come. Hit the like button while you're down there. Leave your comments about your takeaways from the LSU basketball teams. And we're going to try to spin things forward before we sign off here. And we'll go back to the men. TJ, they go to the Greenbrier, which Saints fans are. This is the same place where they had their training camp for several years. It's kind of out in the hills in West Virginia. There's this giant big resort. There's a golf tour. I think the Live Golf Tour had a tournament there last year. But they also have an arena, and that's where this tournament is going to be. It's going to be a good test for LSU. They play Friday or Saturday. Saturday against Pitt?
They play Friday, then Sunday.
Friday against Pitt. I'm sorry. Yeah, Friday. I think it's at 1:30, an afternoon game against Pitt. Pitt is undefeated. Pitt's a top 20 Ken Palm team. This is going to be a stiff test. And then win or lose, they'll play another game on Sunday against the winners will play, the losers will play, and the other Friday game is UCF versus Wisconsin. So LSU will get 2 Power 5 conference teams. And I am saying Power 5. We're counting the Big East in basketball. So we're gonna learn a lot more about the Tigers here.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to see the Pittsburgh game. Can't tell you, just it's a real challenge. It should be a bigger challenge than the Kansas State game because again, Kansas State kind of looks a little bit not as stout as it has in the past couple of years. Pittsburgh's really good. Their offense is really good. They have guard play and Jalen Lowe and Leggett that are really good shooters, really dynamic ball handlers that will test Jordan Sears, who is a 5'11 guard. Tries very hard, but there's limitations to being a 5'11 point guard. And they'll probably ask a lot from Jai Bailey again. He's the glue to their perimeter defense, and that's where it starts up front. And when it comes to their offense, will Vyctorius be a third straight double-digit 15-plus performance? I hope so, at least if I'm an LSU fan or LSU coach. But you do want to make sure that guys don't get into foul trouble, such as Cam Carter, because they'll definitely need him. Again, Charleston Southern did a really good job, but I think you saw that LSU just could overwhelm them at the end, the last 10 minutes of the second half, but they turned things around. But against Pittsburgh, a quality opponent, that's probably not going to be a good bet to bet on. And last thing I'll just highlight very quickly, just the defense again. It starts there because LSU, they're light. The defense is not just getting stops, but also getting the rebounds, which start your fast break. And LSU is really athletic at all five positions because they're a little bit of a lanky group, especially in the front court. But they have to get the rebounds and they have to make sure that they get misses and obviously take that and help their offense get buoyed.
And we should talk a little bit about Cam Carter. I think the big question here, I think Matt McMahon highlighted it before the season. He wants Cam Carter to be more efficient, right, from the field, from three-point range. And so far, he's been super efficient.
Very.
He's been he's been shooting it really well from the field, especially against Kansas State, his old team. He really caught fire. I think the question is, can he maintain that efficiency? Can he? I dropped my phone again. I did that last week. Yeah. Can he maintain that efficiency? Can he keep it rolling once the competition gets a little bit better? I think that's a big question.
Yeah, it's hard for anyone to shoot 55+% from three. That's an unrealistic expectation. But in terms of being a real deal 42% three-point shooter, closer to 48-49 field goal percentage, and being reliable down the stretch in close situations, I think so. Cam Carter, his jump shot is very consistent. I don't think I've seen him shoot a shot differently all season. When he has time, even when he is getting fouled, he's had like a couple and 1 threes, including last night. He didn't make the free throw last night, but he had a potential 4-point play, and that's a rare sight. And I think you have to take that like with a bit more seriousness if a player is doing that multiple times already. Carter also has shown that he's not going to be a pick and roll driver, but he can do it, as well as he can attack a closeout and get to the basket and is willing to run in the fast break. Carter seems to be an offensive player that, if you just give him one good look and it goes in, he should be feeling confident and able to just go and be a threat going forward. If he's not able to get a good look, then he'll just be quiet for the first 6-7 minutes of the game, which is obviously not ideal for LSU.
Typical streaky shooter. It is early, but these are the types of games where you start to build an NCAA tournament resume. I think first and foremost, you just want to see LSU compete in these games and show that they're going to be capable of being in a very tough SEC race. But what's a good? I mean, is a split a good result? That's kind of what I was thinking is the baseline. If you split here, you're still kind of on track as far as your resume goes.
Yeah, the Pittsburgh. If LSU wins against Pittsburgh, then that's the real national audience. We are here type of moment. Kansas State was like a build up to it. A Pittsburgh win, I think, would be okay. Officially, like you have to look at us now with a bit different level of seriousness. I think a split is more realistic. I have to see how Wisconsin UCF look. Those are two quality teams with people that I think also are I guess going to be a challenge if LSU plays one of those two squads. But yeah, I think LSU, I think you should expect the split just to be reasonable. If they go 0-2, it's not the end of the world. However, it does matter how it looks. If they get destroyed both times, then that's a little bit of a concern that, okay, maybe the Kansas State game was a bit more of a blip and close wins against us. Charleston Southern is a bit more what LSU looks like.
Yeah, I think if they do fall short against Pitt on Friday, that game on Sunday becomes, again, it's not the end of the world, but it becomes a pretty big game.
It's
Like you do want to come home with that split.
It's not the end of the world, but if you look at the SEC schedule, because the SEC is so tough, you need to, in the non-conference slate, a few wins against power conference teams can do really well for your NCAA tournament resume, because you're going to have some losses in SEC play because the conference is so tough, so deep. So yeah, you're going to need to take advantage of all the opportunities you can get to add a nice point to your NCAA resume, and then they'll get 2 shots at it this weekend.
Yeah, and on the other hand, if they beat Pitt, then Sunday's lanyard. I mean, you really start to build that resume. So on the women's side, we mentioned this LSU plays Tulane tonight, 6 o'clock game, 7 o'clock game at the PMAC. Obviously, it's never nothing when Tulane and LSU get together, but this is another game LSU should expect to cruise in. So we skip past that and look to their next week. And you mentioned this, LSU goes to the Bahamas. They play Washington on Monday, this Thanksgiving holiday tournament, and then you beat Washington on Monday, you're almost certainly going to get NC State. NC State actually plays Southern on Monday in the other half of that bracket. So if LSU were to get upset by Washington, you could say LSU Southern on Wednesday. But assuming we get LSU NC State, that's the one everybody circled from the beginning. Now, NC State's lost a couple games, lost to South Carolina, no shame in that, and they also lost to, is it TCU? TCU they lost to. So, it's kind of a shame a little bit of the luster has come off that matchup. But still, it'll be good to see the Lady Tigers get actually tested.
Yeah, NC State lost to TCU this past weekend. By the way, Haley Van Lith, TCU, she's had a really nice start to the season. In that game, she had 18 points and 10 assists. She wasn't very efficient, but that double-double, especially with the assists, is a good sign for her. And it's a good sign that she's sort of trying to get back to where she was before she transferred to LSU. So it's good to see her playing well. I think NC State, they made it to the Final Four last season. They returned a lot of their production, and they were ranked in the top 10 preseason. I think, if looking back at that NCAA tournament run, the run of the Final Four, I think it might be easy to look at it and say, oh, this was kind of a fluke. Things kind of broke right for them, and they made a run to the Final Four. I still think they have a lot of talent, and the most talent they have is in the backcourt. LSU is going to have to defend their guards and stop them from dribble penetrating. It's really where they excel. So we're going to find out exactly what kind of defensive abilities LSU's new guards have, especially Cheyenne Day-Wilson, especially Kaylin Gilbert. We know what last year Poa is. She's back. She's playing. She's one of the best defenders on the team. So when you watch that game, it's in the afternoon. It's on Flow Hoops, which is a streaming service that doesn't work very well, and you have to pay for it. So if you really want to pony up a few bucks to watch that game, I'll just watch to see how LSU contains those NC State guards, how they prevent them from dribble penetrating. I don't know if we're going to get if LSU is going to get Miracle Shepherd back. It's interesting because Kim Mulkey has sort of gone out of her way a few times to really hype up her and what she can bring to the team. We've only seen her in one exhibition, but I think they really like her, and I think they're really a fan of her game. She's a Mississippi State transfer, really good active defender, tall and long, and can really get into the passing lanes. I think Kim Mulkey and her staff really like her and really like what she can provide. I think LSU will get her back soon. I'm not exactly sure when, but if she plays in those games in the Bahamas, I think that will tell us a lot about where LSU stands defensively, particularly in the backcourt.
And as far as the women go, it's not going to be a question of whether they make the NCAA tournament. But when we're in late February, early March, and we start to talk about could LSU be a 2 seed, a 3 seed, a 1 seed, I mean, whatever that discussion ends up being, they don't have a ton of opportunity in their non-conference to build the resume. And they do play Stanford, and they play Seton Hall later. I mean, but outside of that, it's kind of SEC play. And the SEC, imagine telling this to a basketball fan 20 years ago, but the men's SEC is much deeper than the women's SEC. So there's not there's not a ton of opportunities to just pile on resume wins. So from that perspective, LSU really wants these games.
Yeah, and I think Kim never really schedules tough in the non-conference. I think that's by design. She doesn't really see the value in it. I think they'll have enough opportunities in the conference slate to pick up quality wins. I think there's 4 or 5 teams, SEC teams, ranked in the AP poll right now, so they'll have opportunities. I think Kim wants to keep the non-conference kind of light to allow them to ease into the season, allow them to work out whatever issues they have before the real games start. And what she really cares about is getting that top 4 tournament seed so that LSU can host the first 2 rounds of the tournament. Whether they're the 1 seed or the 4 seed, I don't think it makes too much of a difference to her as long as they've got those 2 home games to start the tournament. And there are lots of paths for them for this kind of team to get there. They're probably going to be favored in all of their SEC games besides 2, South Carolina and Texas. We'll see how things shake out. But yeah, that's where things play out. The schedule, the non-conference, it's always pretty light. It's a little lighter this year, but they do have a few tests, and that starts next week.
I'll be curious, just my 2 cents. I'll be curious to see how NC State guards Flau'jae.
Yeah.
Sort of, I'm not sure if the defensive talent, I know obviously the scoring talent, but defensively, if they have some kind of strategy with this superior team that they'll face, if they'll, I don't know, make it a little bit harder for Flau'jae to get going.
Yeah, she's done a great job of finding space. LSU runs sort of actions for her off stagger screens and pin downs, sort of get her open space in the mid-range, and she's done a great job of knocking down her mid-range shots. Maybe on those kind of actions, maybe you sort of blitz her a little bit more, hedge those screens, maybe sort of try to take away those shots, because most of the teams they've played so far have been in drops. They've sort of been away from the action and sort of allowed her that space in the mid-range. I don't think that's a wise strategy, particularly given how well she shot from that area of the floor. But yeah, once you get a real power conference team with real talent, real length and athleticism, I think you'll start to see exactly how can Flau'jae continue the start? How can Michaela Williams and Nisa Morrow complement her, and how they can keep this rolling?
These guys know their hoops, if you couldn't already tell. So we're glad to get a basketball podcast in for you. I mean, it's crossover season. Football's always going to kind of dominate the conversation, but we're 5 games in for the women. It'll be 6 tonight and then 4 for the men, and they get going this weekend too with some really big games. So that's going to do it for today. We'll be back with more basketball and obviously much more as we get into the new year and the conference season. But for now, we're going to sign off. Our producer today was Alex Lee. He's Reed Darcey. TJ Brown, I'm Zach Ewing, and we'll see you next time on the LSU Sports Insider.